This. Okay. So today, part one of Madame Bovary. So it's 58 pages in this edition I got. It's about that in every section of it. So what to say about Madame Bovary then? So this is our one and only novel I'm giving you in the class. Just to give you a little bit of literary history there, the novel was a form, didn't start until about 1750 or so in England and France. And before that, literature was pretty much just like the stuff we have been reading. Lots of poetry, lots of drama, but not really prose as far as what we're used to today. So a lot of early novels started out as written like they were in letters. Lots of characters would write letters to each other, and that would almost comprise the plot, of a lot of the early 1700s novels that came up. Flaubert was one of the writers who helped innovate the novel into what it is today, as far as a study of characters and events and things of this nature. So Flaubert was writing in France, and I think he started this book. I think he published this book around 1850. I was reading the intro right before class. But Flaubert, we talked last class about romantic poetry, right? This book is a response almost to the romantic movement. So we're getting lots of movements in this second part of the class, mostly just because we're going at a very rapid pace. But this movement is still a prominent part of fiction today, and that movement is called realism. And realism. And Flaubert, when he sought to write this book, he wanted to write within the boundaries of ordinary experience. Right? He didn't want to have fantastical plots. He didn't want to have supernatural stuff. He didn't want to, just like a lot of the stuff we have read, right? He did larger than life characters, rejecting stuff like how the epic poets wrote things. So literature based on the mundane and the ordinary. That was what Flaubert sought out to do. And Flaubert almost started a big tidal wave across the entire world as far as literature went. The English started their own realist movement. Writers like George Eliot. I don't know if you guys know George Eliot. I know more of the American writers like Henry James, William Dean Howells. There was a whole movement in America as well to kind of write literature just based on the ordinary, right? The reason why this literature started becoming popular, this was the time where the middle class finally started to spring up, right? No longer was there just very rich and very poor like there was for many centuries before. This was, especially in France when this was written, we started having this middle class sort of group. Of course, they're called the bourgeoisie. Right? If any of you guys have ever read Marxist theory, right, you probably have heard that term, the bourgeoisie. And that's pretty much this group of middle class individuals. So a lot of what Flaubert is going for in this book is almost a satire too of the bourgeoisie, right? This middle class people, who they read books, they get these crazy ideals, but their lives are very much ordinary and mundane as well, right? And you guys can probably see how that's happening here in this book. Emma marries this doctor, who is very much just an ordinary guy, right? He doesn't do anything fancy. He doesn't go to the theater, right? He doesn't stir her passions. She lived. They both live in this very small town where life's boring.
I mean, he doesn't even have a burnt up, crazy wife locked away in the attic.
Yeah, so that's definitely the backdrop of the book. Flabeau is also known for his very elegant style, right? I don't know if you guys ever noticed, but the narrator of this book never comments on things, right? Flabeau writes this book almost like it's a documentary. There's if you read a lot of other fiction, the narrator sometimes gets involved a lot, right? This is how you should think about this character. Right? Flabeau doesn't do that. He just paints portraits, of all these characters and kind of lets you decide what you want to do with them yourself. He's very good at description, which is something we'll talk a little bit about. But the main thing with this book is character. Like, this is a book. It's not about outlandish plots, the battle of heaven and hell, and all this stuff like we've been reading. This is a story of character. Right? We have this whole book becomes this psychological portrait of Emma Bovary, right? The sort of temptations she feels, the boredom she feels in her everyday life, the quest to make meaning in an ordinary, mundane life, right? This is something we can all relate to, I think, in some respects. We're all kind of out in the boonies. It's not like we can go to Broadway every day, right? So we can also sort of feel this, especially right now, I think, considering we're all sort of locked in our houses and never going out and doing anything. The mundane suddenly starts to be intensified even more, in times like this. I don't know. I'll open the floor up to some of you guys. What do you think of just in general? What's your general impressions of this book so far? Is the style striking you? You like this? It's definitely different than anything we've read so far. How's it going for you guys?
I gotta admit, the style isn't anything crazy. It doesn't really stand out, but at the same time, it never gets boring either. He
Yep.
manages to keep just such a perfect pace going throughout the whole thing, even just basically describing some a desperate housewife is still at least somewhat engaging, even if I can already see and I haven't read ahead, but tell me, this is going to end something like the ending of The Graduate, isn't it?
It's going to end a lot more. The Graduate's ending is very melancholy, right?
Yeah.
But this book ends very, very badly. I will just say
Oh,
that. Yeah,
oh boy.
yeah. Things are going to get really bad in the next two class sessions as far as what happens with Emma. So, not to just to foreshadow, things are going downhill from here.
Yeah, I mean, when I read it, I wasn't just like out of place in the story. I just kept reading it. I mean, it was at that sense of this isn't my typical reading, but I don't hate it.
Right.
Yeah, there's not a lot of dialogue, is there?
There's more in the next part.
More?
Yeah.
It just feels like more like inner monologue than anything. Because every once in a while someone would speak, but it's not necessarily a conversation.
Right.
Which to me doesn't give you a real sense for certain characters and stuff.
Yeah, we definitely I talked about narrator a second ago. Even though Flabeau's a narrator doesn't really comment, you're exactly right, right? Flabeau's narrator almost does take over the story. It doesn't give us a lot of dialogue, just like you said.
Do we ever find out who in the story the narrator is? Because at the very beginning, I mean, it's very obviously somebody who was in Charles's class in school who's just basically telling someone, now listen to this crazy story about what happened to a guy I knew in high school, basically. Like, literally, the first line is, we were in class when the headmaster came in, followed by a new fellow. And so
That's a good question. I haven't thought of that.
Yeah. It's kind of a weird transition though, because you hear about this lanky boy that just came into class, and then all of a sudden we're transitioned into what's Charles's life like? How was he raised? And it was just like, what happened to the classroom?
yeah. Like, it does kind of jump from first person personal to first person to omniscient. Am I saying those right?
Yep.
Yeah. But it's so smooth. It's like I said, it's basically just like, yeah. Now, let me tell you about. Give me a little bit of background so you know where this guy came from before we go on more with all the crazy shit his wife got up to. Not the first wife though. I'll go over her real quick. But the second wife, she got up to some stuff.
The first wife got jealous and then died. How convenient, right?
I mean, in any other story, I'd be
I
looking
really
at
like how
him.
he done it.
Did you like how he killed the first wife?
He did?
Well, no, not how he killed the first life. No. Just how the story was told and how it just kind of all unwinded. It was just so smooth
Yeah.
to read.
Yeah.
And
It was kind of funny because it was like, she's dead. She truly left me after all. I'm like, what? Oh, I know she fainted and she coughed blood or something, and then now she's dead. There's no death scene or anything. It's just she died.
Yeah.
I love the descriptions of like what he's feeling after that. He's like, well, I didn't really love her, but I'm sad that she seemed to love me. So, and very,
I mean, it kind of seems like the roles changed once he married his second wife. Because it's almost like he became his first wife
yeah.
in the sense of he really cares for this woman, but this woman's like, I'm not too sure about this.
Yeah.
I
mean,
go ahead, Justin.
I mean, both parties were pretty much aware that that first marriage was a marriage of convenience. She wanted a husband to take care of her. She had a nice inheritance, and he was he was a doctor. That's fairly decent as far as society goes. So, on paper, it was a decent match, and I mean, he might have entertained some thoughts, but that was all he did. He entertained some thoughts. Who in their life hasn't? So, like I say, it was a good match on paper, and she just was very old and just very wound up.
Yeah. And his mother had to play a part in it too, of course.
Well, I mean, again, match of convenience. You know, this is partly at least a business transaction, and you cooked your books going into it. So,
yeah, I'm not a big fan of his mother.
Yeah, she's very much. He describes her as jealous, right? She's jealous because his son's in love with a woman.
She seems to have her nose in everything.
I mean,
it described her about a man who gave up his house, but he's still happy that the family living in it was happy, or something like that. That was like the description of her, and I'm like, I could say that, but at the same time, I'm like, is she really though? I don't know. She kind of rubs me the wrong way.
There's a lot of overbearing mothers like that, right? That don't like it when, especially when sons.
Yeah, she seems to fit in the stereotype.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, I mean, you've got that father of his, always drunk, always off trying to find some new ridiculous venture to waste money on, always flirting with the tavern girls. I mean, it is the stereotype, but she pretty much hung all her hopes on this kid, on her son. And once he, started getting up and got his own family, started moving away, she looked around and went, "Oh shit, I'm alone now, aren't I?"
So it's not as drawn out as Emma, right? But it's also a study of a mundane life too, with the mother. I always like the little bits of conflict between them, like when they start verbally spouting venom at each other. I always get a kick out of that in this book. Yeah. What do you guys think about? What are you guys thinking about Emma so far? This is her character is the central portrait of the book. How do you feel so far? Are you relating to her? Do you feel her pain? I guess to ground this question, Justin was talking about it a second ago, but at this time, marriage it was called a marriage economy. If any of you guys have ever read Jane Austen books, you probably know about this. But people most of the time didn't get married out of love back in Europe, especially, right? They would oftentimes, of course, you guys know, sons were passed down, property and whatnot in families. And girls in families really were just extra baggage, as far as what do we do with them. So oftentimes marriages were prearranged almost, right? Girls were married off by the father to a suitor, and in exchange for marrying the girl, right, the husband would get a fairly large dowry with money or property, right? So to get rid of the daughter as an economic burden, the father would marry them off. That's one reason why we still have this trope of, should a guy ask for the father's hand in marriage for the daughter, right? It goes back to this old marriage economy where it was more of a business transaction.
Granted, that was more an upper class thing, and sure, some of the middle class did it, but I mean, even in the book, old Renault is it Renault or Renault, or how do you say his name?
I think it's Renault.
Renault. Old Renault even says to Charles, "Hey, I'm fine with it, but let me go make sure she's happy with it first, and then I'll give you a sign." Like,
Yeah, I mean that he was probably more caring than most fathers
yeah.
in this type of arrangement. He didn't want to marry her off to somebody who he didn't think she would be happy with. So he's probably almost an exception to the rule as far as caring about her feelings.
I mean, honestly, I'd say that's more of the whole realism thing. There's, like I said, outside of the wheelers and dealers who just, had kids specifically to grow out the family and the business, most of the time, are you really going to run into somebody who doesn't care at least somewhat for their children and their future? The guy's temperament and what he's like as a person goes into the decision just as much as what kind of money he's making. I mean, that's why things like gentlemanly conduct, school as of comporting, whatever they were called, all that stuff was so, got as big as it did and is still done today. You had to prove to the guy, not only do I have the money to support your daughter in the style she's accustomed to or better, but I'm not going to get drunk every night and beat the ever-loving shit out of her and your grandchildren.
Right. So you're exactly right. He judged his character too, like based off their interactions when he visited them as the doctor. So, yeah, being ordinary here in his case is a good thing in the marriage market, right? So, knowing this backdrop of, well, she has a choice, but does she really? In this marriage, um, she starts to get bored with it, right? I don't know. What do you guys think about her? Do you sympathize? So far, at least, I say so far with where we're at, right? Things are going to get crazier. But how are you feeling about her so far?
She would have done great in the Twilight novels.
The sparkling vampire would be, a breath of fresh air for her.
But she's enough salt to the earth to not just start throwing herself off of cliffs and whatnot when he rejects her. That girl would have gone out and found a werewolf or something else.
I mean, you read about her and you find out that she has this big old fantasy of what love's supposed to be, what it's supposed to be for her at least. And that's not what she's getting, which makes her unhappy because she has this fantasy of passion, of undying love and foreverness. And it's just like, girl, compared to what you had before, it's kind of better because she wanted to live the farm life. She wanted that gone. She didn't realize that she only went up like a step compared to what she thought she'd be, because she was more infatuated with Charles than she was in love with him, and that's what she thought was love. I mean, I can understand to the point because she's kind of younger, so she don't know what she's doing, but at the same time I'm thinking, what's wrong with you?
Right.
Not to mention, oh, go ahead, Shane.
That's why she just heard the word marriage and she just started thinking. No matter who it was, then she just thought of marriage. And she got asked, she would have said yes, because she had all those, thoughts in her mind, and she tried to want to, start going down that road, I guess. And the thought of marriage came to her mind. She just said yes, no matter what. I think that's the way I read it.
Right. Women are just build off what Shane just said, right? Women are conditioned to want to marry early, right? Especially in this marriage economy.
Thing is, though, she can say she wants this and she wants that, all she wants to herself, but she had even noted beforehand, yeah, this man is just utterly besotted with me. He'll do whatever I ask him to. And not once does she ever even slightly intimate, honey, I really hate this provincial living. Is there any way we could move to a city?
Right.
Because, once he finds out that it might help her a little bit, he's willing to pull up stakes and head to the closest city he can find to try and see if it'll help her condition any at all. Say what you want about the guy, but he's utterly devoted, and she doesn't take advantage of that at all, for good or ill.
Yeah. When she finally got that taste of the party life, it was kind of over. She started becoming hostile with him and everything. Because beforehand, she was just more or less cringed by the fact of how much he loved her. But then as soon as she got the taste of the party life, it was very much, she flipped the switch.
Right.
When she met the Viscount or something, it was just it flipped in her head.
Well, she had the grand waltz at the party, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If she had said, that was so fun, I love that, I would love for our lives to be a lot about that, let's move to a city and you try and get, better connected, Charles might have said, well, let me make sure I can do it and us not, end up homeless real quick. But he'd have done it for her, I think. and you see it sometimes in literature. She has all these grand ideas about what she wants and whatnot, but she never ever takes a step to get it.
which is
Like,
which is ironic because she gets angry at Charles, right? Because she says he lacks ambition, right? He doesn't want to do more things with his life. So it's ironic with what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, her ideals is very much that of like a meek person, because she grew up in like a convent or something, and then she went straight to her father's house taking care of the house. So I'm not sure if she thought that she had a place to say, or if it was very much her just thinking he should have known. Because this is the time period is very much of a husband is like the man of the house and stuff like that. So I don't know. Maybe that plays a part. Maybe it's just her in her head thinking he should have known.
I honestly think it's her how she did end up raised in a convent, because like from when she was small, she's been around just nothing but a bunch of nuns and priests. She didn't even really see her parents' marriage much growing up, you know? She had, a little kid's understanding of what marriage is. Then she gets into a convent and she's reading all of these great romantic poems and whatnot, and how love is, God's gift to us in marriage and all that. And she's just by the time she goes back when she's grown a bit, her mom's dead, so she's never really been around a real relationship before to understand what it is and what it looks like long term. She's, I hate to say, she's basically any given 15, 16-year-old these days.
Yeah, to build off that, right? Flabeau goes to great lengths to talk about like how she does shape her conceptions of love. He's blaming literature a lot on her sort of unreal ways of thinking about love, right? He talks about she reads stuff like Renaissance sonnets, right, which we just covered. She reads these early romance novels. You guys know these what we mean by the romance novels, right? The stuff that you see for a couple of bucks at Walmart, right? It's got the cowboy on the cover, right? So
Bodice rippers, I think they call them.
what do they call them?
Bodice rippers is one I've heard a lot.
The classic sort of books that housewives read, right? That's still her thing. She reads a lot of that kind of stuff to get her definition of love.
She would have done better with a couple Tijuana Bibles. Oh, wait, no, she probably, if I was reading it right about what she was saying about the, I guess, prints or paintings or whatever the heck the girls had snuck in there from their families, she did have Tijuana Bibles in there and still ended up this way.
Even her time in the convent, right? She's trained to love God in this sort of all-giving way, right? Which is it's an idealistic love, right? More than a sort of real everyday love that she even learns in her faith at the convent. So 15, 16, right? She wants to be in love with love, right? More than actually love someone. I don't know if you guys agree with that statement.
She's in love with the idea of being in love. She doesn't really actually want to have somebody. She just wants the romance and the highs, the wooing and all that.
Yeah, like she's in love with like whirlwind affairs, not necessarily marriage. Like she loves the idea of courting, dating, passion. She don't like the idea of talking about what's for dinner. She don't like mundane stuff, basically, which not many women do, but it still kind of puts you off in the bad way.
She'd have done well in high society in Paris around this time, oddly enough.
Like she daydreamed about Paris and all these big cities, about women traveling, which, I mean, I can understand to a point, but she don't share any of her thoughts with him or anything. She's hostile in certain situations that it's just almost like pent up anger.
Yeah. If calm, rational discourse happened at all, like that's 70% of books gone right there.
Books all about lack of communication in a relationship. Right?
No, I mean, in general, 70% of all books would be gone if people actually just sat down and talked like, I saw you in the garden last night. What, with that guy helping me tie my shoe? Oh, wow, this was going to go a whole different way. I had a bottle of poison stashed away. Damn. We need to talk more, honey.
This was a way that even realist fiction might not be completely real, right? Most of the time, people would talk these things out. Maybe not, right?
Yeah. A lot of books just go towards extremes. Like they go to like serial killer extremes, or some people with like very much mental problems extremes. It's never truly in a sense of normal.
Oddly enough, sitcoms probably come the closest these days, because I was just thinking there is some parallels between this and oh Lord, what was the one with the Bundy family?
Married with Children.
Married with Children, that's the one. Peg Bundy would have let him know very quick that she expected, a little bit of whining and dining on occasion. And like I said, literally that is all that she would need to say to Charles to have it done. Like, he ended up standing just with his back up against the wall, his feet killing him all night, so he didn't A, have to embarrass her with his dancing, or B, have to be an embarrassment by admitting, how the hell do you play this card game anyways?
I think she just done that so she could dance by herself with all these other men, be honest. Because even if he did try to like move to a city or woo her, I don't think it would have made that much of a difference. It probably would have made her more like kind towards him, but I don't think it would have necessarily changed her actions. Maybe prolonged it, but usually with women of that type of like personality and mental state and the way they think, it's something that can't necessarily be pushed down.
No.
It's going to come back eventually.
Almost certainly.
Yeah, she still cheat, right? If she would have moved to the city, with what we say, well, probably so, right? She would have found a dazzling aristocrat in the city, right?
Maybe not cheating specifically, but something scandalous she would have eventually gravitated to just for the thrill of it.
Yeah, I mean, even if she ended up marrying someone with like higher ranking or class or whatever, I think she still would have eventually had some kind of scandalous affair or something, because eventually everything does calm down. It's not a roller coaster all the time, which is what she's wanting. She's wanting this like big old declarement of love and stuff like that. She doesn't want anything to be flatlined or anything. So even if she did marry like an aristocrat or something, she still wouldn't have been happy.
Honestly, if she'd ended up as some politician's trophy wife, one of the ones they, let run their own schemes in the background, that probably would have satisfied her. But anything outside of that, probably not.
She's the wife on House of Cards, right? The ambitious, behind-the-scenes wife.
I never saw that. Is it any good?
It starts out first 3 or 4 seasons of it really good, but then it just goes pretty quick after that.
Like Dexter, huh?
But just for Dexter. You can't get an ending worse than Dexter. It's impossible.
I know I hear a lot of people were really mad about how Breaking Bad went down in the end.
I thought it had a beautiful ending.
I still haven't sat down and watched it.
Yeah, so let me go over a couple of passages with you guys to round their discussion as well, just to kind of show you Flebeau's what I was talking about earlier in the class with his style. Right, this is something we kind of need to get a little bit of a grasp on, besides just the ideas of the book. Consult my notes here. One good. I'll just give you as a couple of passages. One is on page 13 in part 1, chapter 2. But last paragraph on page 13. Emily's got the right book. If you're using a PDF, the paragraph starts with, "The fracture was simple without complications of any kind." I'll give you a second to see if you can find it. So he says, "The fracture was simple without complications of any kind. Charles could not have dared to hope for an easier one. And so, recalling his teacher's manners at the bedsides of the injured, he comforted the patient with all sorts of lively remarks. The surgeon's caresses that are like the oil with which he greases the scalpel. For splints, they went off to fetch from the cart shed a bundle of laths. Charles chose one, cut it into pieces, and polished it with a shard of window glass, while the maidservant tore up some sheets to make bandages. Mademoiselle Emma worked at sewing some pads. As she was a long time finding her needle case, her father grew impatient. She said nothing in response, but as she sewed, she kept pricking her fingers, which then she raised to her mouth to suck." Then the next paragraph. "Charles was surprised by the whiteness of her fingernails. They were glossy, delicate at the tips, more carefully cleaned than, I don't know how you, Dieppe ivories, and filed into almond shapes. Yet her hand was not beautiful, not pale enough perhaps, and a little dry at the knuckles. It was also too long and without soft inflections in its contours. What was beautiful about her was her eyes. Although they were brown, they seemed black because of the lashes, and her gaze fell upon you openly with a bold candor." That passage is pretty. When I talked about his style, right, his very, very descriptive style, right. This is a good example of that. He goes all the way down to describing her knuckles, for crying out loud, right? Which is, this might be a convention of literature today, right? But Flebeau's the one who invented this, right? He's the one who taught us to sort of go to the very mundane details as far as description. I love the description about her sucking her finger right after she pricks her finger with a needle. Right, very, very provocative sort of sexual imagery right there. Right. So he paints her as this beautiful woman, but with imperfections too. Right. She's not Beatrice from the Divine Comedy. Right. She's something. She is a real person too, with her own imperfections. Another good passage is very end of the section for today, page 58. right at the very end of part 1. This is a great description too. We again get more pricking of fingers. It says, one day while tidying a drawer in anticipation of her departure, she pricked her fingers on something. It was a piece of wire in her wedding bouquet. The orange blossom buds were yellow with dust, and the satin ribbons with their silver piping were fraying at the edges. She threw it into the fire. It flared up more quickly than dry straw, and it lay like a red bush on the embers, slowly being consumed. She watched it burn. The little cardboard berries burst open. The binding wire twisted. The braid melted, and the shriveled paper petals hovering along the fire back like black butterflies at last flew way up the chimney. When they left Tosti's in March, Madame Bovary was pregnant. Right, so great image of her marriage burning right before your eyes, right? Throwing her bouquet, very dramatic, throwing her bouquet in the fire and it burning and shriveling up. We get the butterflies, right? Of course, whenever we think about butterflies, that's often a symbol of like freedom, right? I don't know. That's just this very documentary sort of very elaborate descriptive style LeBeau has, right? Which is what we talked about earlier, right? Maybe that's why he doesn't do a lot of dialogues, because he gets very invested in this extreme description.
Oh, and also she's pregnant.
And she's pregnant, right? I told you guys the story's going to go sharply downhill from here, right?
Yeah.
We're going to get her being a mother in part 2 of the book, right? How is she as a mother? With you can probably imagine how that's going to go, right?
Son or daughter?
It's a daughter, I believe.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not ending well.
That
is not ending well.
She wants a son, as we will see, and
Oh, just wants to send her to the convent.
might as well just send her off while we're at it. Yeah, we'll see the kid has a bunch of emotional needs, and you think she's going to meet them for her kid, right? You will see. It doesn't go well. But this raises the question too, right?
I feel like she's gonna take us like Medea through tragedy. Like with her, like I see a lot of similarities between the two.
How do you mean? Explain more.
Like they're both just really unhappy. Of course, in Medea's case, though, like she's really got more of a reason because her husband's left her and everything. Whereas with Emma, it's more of her getting affection, that her not getting the affection and the attention she thinks she deserves. And with her child, Medea abandons her children due to that. I feel like she's going to do the same. Of course, we read that in high school, but
You're talking about the Greek tragedy about Medea?
Medea of Colchis?
Yeah. I think so, yeah.
Oh, it's been a while since I looked at it. I didn't even remember she'd had kids with Jason.
Yeah, in the Greek tragedy, Medea, she actually ends up killing kids, right, just to prove a point to Jason.
Jesus.
Yeah. That's another classic ancient Greek text about women, right?
Uh-huh.
I probably just want to say this child is something more of a trap in our marriage. Because without that child, it's more likely that they could separate in some way. But not with this child. This child is more of a something to hold her there, more of an anchor.
Actually,
And I don't think she's gonna take that well.
that's a question. What are the divorce laws like at this point in time? Like, I mean, sure, it's post-revolution France, so they're bound to be fairly libertine, but still, it's post-revolution France.
So you have
I
to,
mean,
you have to
she
keep
can still kind of like run away and not have too many consequences, except for when she has a child. When she has a child, she's more frowned upon than anything, and she don't want to be frowned upon. She cares too much about people's opinions.
I mean, Lord, go 2 districts over and change your name.
Yeah, she could just really could have left, find whoever she wants to find. But with this child, it's going to be something totally different. She's probably going to see this as more or less of chains holding her down.
Yeah, we get the butterfly image, right? But you're exactly right. It becomes an anchor trapping her, right? I was going to say too, you guys got to keep in mind this is in France. The Catholic Church is the main religious authority in France, right? That's why she goes to a convent. Protestants even today aren't really too prevalent in France. It's a very Catholic nation, right? But you guys know that the Catholics have a much stricter stance on divorce than Protestants do, right? So divorce, to answer Justin's question, divorce isn't easy to obtain.
I mean, it's kind of odd that she doesn't have her faith question her feelings, I feel like. Because more or less she just thinks that it's supposed to happen. She doesn't question how she thinks, let alone with her faith. I mean, her faith, let alone coincide with it. She just thinks she spent time in a convent, and that was it. Like, she don't necessarily, to me, seem very faithful or faith-oriented.
Yeah.
True. I mean, actually, even today, isn't that the big demarcation of a Catholic education? Yeah, I know all about the Bible. What? Oh, God? No, I don't really kind of believe in that too much. No.
Yeah, a lot of people go through that experience. You get good educations, I think, in Catholic high schools and stuff. Most of the students I've taught who've come from them have been really good. They read a lot more, which is a good thing.
Yeah, but how much of that is the school and how much of that is crazy parents who would whip them bloody if they happen to find them with a Game Boy?
Yeah.
You know, Mortal Kombat and Call of Duty and all that will make you do school shootings. They proved it on the news, they did.
Well, the Columbine, it was Doom, if you remember the very first one. Big shooting, they blamed the Doom.
I thought it was Marilyn Manson.
I think they might have blamed both. I don't know.
Which is real funny because one of the dudes who made Doom is to this day, practicing Mormon. Like, someone even asked him once, man, how are you making a game like this and being a Mormon? He looked at him like, I mean, you go to hell and kill demons in order to save mankind. I don't. He's kind of Jesus, but with a shotgun.
Yeah, nothing strange about that.
Actually, I haven't played Doom Eternal yet, but I think they have made him kind of Jesus with a shotgun at this point. Like, some people were complaining they kind of added in a lot more lore about where the Doom guy came from in the first place.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to it.
Yeah.
I still haven't beat the 2016 one yet, so I gotta beat it first.
I'm on the last level, and I'm not even stuck on a boss. It's just this crappy platforming section that I can't get past. Well, that I haven't been willing to sit down and force my way through with low ammo, health, and armor, you know?
So yeah, I love when our conversations just go. Shane, you got any other thoughts? You had a good comment earlier. Do you have any other thoughts on anything we've been discussing? Anything you want to add? Feeling good? Yeah, so I think this is probably enough for today. I think we got a good early grasp on the novel. I think we had a good conversation that everybody else in the class can benefit from once they hear it, since we're recording. So part 2 for Wednesday. As far as the discussion board posts go this week, I'll post one for parts 1 and 2. So you'll just have to do one post this week. Is it? Okay. I didn't have you do one on the Romantic poets either, just because we read so many poems. It's kind of hard to focus a response, right? So yeah, by the end of the week, I'll give you some questions about part 1 and 2 of the book. You can use both parts to come up with a response. Okay. So anything else before we end class? All right, guys. Well, good discussion. I enjoyed it. The discussions are only going to get even more rich over the coming days, just because the book escalates pretty quick from here. So until next time, you guys take care.